Now that we have our public site up and running and we know that we have anonymous access working okay, we need to make a connection between our public site and then the Azure Access Control, so that when users access the site, it will be authenticated by the Azure Access Control. So we need to go and create a new namespace for us to actually be able to use up here. So we do that by going over to our Azure administration. So I'm going to go up to Azure. And so I'm going to log in here. So I'll just pause it while... Okay, so this is my Azure Management Portal, and what I want to do is come down the bottom to Active Directory, and we'll see that we have one here called Access Control Namespaces. Now I've got one created already, which is I've given it a name to match the machine that I was using on it, and in theory I could use this control namespace as well, but for the sake of the exercise, so that we know where all the parameters get used, I'm going to go and create a new one. So I'm going to hit the new button, and we're going to go up to Access Control, and then we're going to say Quick Create. Now the name that you give it will have to be globally unique, and so in this case I'm going to use the name of the machine that I'm going to use it on, just for the sake of sort of matching them up. And so I'm going to pick my region, so West US, and I'm going to put it on my relevant subscription here. Obviously the subscription is important because that's where it gets billed for relevant billing pieces and stuff. So this is going to be my namespace, so I'm going to say create, and I'll just pause the video while it creates. Okay, it should only take 30 seconds, a minute or so to create it. So once it's actually created, then we can go and manage this. Okay, so in here what we can configure is the identity providers. So in this particular case, by default we've got Windows Live ID, and so the users that we're allowing to log on will be authenticated by Live ID. So I'm going to leave it the same, but we can go and add different identity providers here, external sources. Now the relaying parties is where we're going to configure our parameters. These represent the site that we're coming from, we get authenticated, and then where we're going to come back to after being authenticated. So that's the relaying party. Certificates are important because we need to trust Azure and make a connection to our site, and so we need to have certificates. So let's go and configure the different settings here. So I'm going to go and create a relaying party first, and this one is going to be my unsolicited sign in. Now what you created as a name doesn't really matter. It's really for your purposes in understanding what it's being used for. Now the realm is where I'm coming from, so when the user clicks on the link, it's going to come out and get authenticated, then return back, which is the return URL. So let's have a look at an actual working configuration and then see what I mean there. So I'm going to go across here, and we're going to go across to the public site. Alright, so this is our working site, and you'll see, for example, on the vendor portal it says sign up, and so you'll see if I click sign up it says that I'm going to go across to Azure Access Control, but we need to tell it where we're coming from, which is the site's public, and where it comes back to after it's been authenticated. So if we have a look at one that's already been configured, which is on my machine, I can go to Azure Active Directory. This is my VM11. If we have a look at this site, we have a relaying party, which is my sign up, and so I'm just going to come from my public site, and then we're going to go to the vendor request sign up. So I'm just going to copy these parameters and change them to match my other machine that we're configuring. So it's going to be from my machine name, sites, public. That's where we're coming from, and then we're going to return to the vendor request sign up page, which is basically what we're going to tell the user to do. Is when they click sign up, we're going to go and authenticate them, capture some details about them, and then let them finish signing up on this page. So I'm going to go and change the machine name, but otherwise it'll match the new machine name. Now the SAML token format is 1.1, and we don't need to encrypt it. We can change the token life if we want it to run a little further, but 600 is the default, and that will work okay. We're saying the identity providers that we're going to use is live ID, and we want to create a new rule group for this. Now we want to create a dedicated certificate, but for us to do that we need to go and actually create it, and you'll see here that it gives us the command line parameter to actually go and make one. So we can use this one to actually go and make a certificate. Now this is going to work for the sake of the exercise, but in theory the certificate that you upload here should be one that's publicly going to be able to be used. Okay, so I've got the command, if you follow the instructions there, I've got the make certificate application, and I've got a little script here. So I'm just going to change my parameters here and use that same parameter. So I'm going to go to my command prompt, C temp. Alright, so I'm in my temp where I've got that mate certificate, and I'm going to go and copy this parameter in there, and we'll execute it. So you'll see that it says execute succeeded, which means that it actually created that certificate. Okay, but where did it put it? So it puts it in the certificate store on the machine. So we're just going to go and run the management console, and from the management console I'm going to go and add remove a snap in, which will be my certificates. By default it'll be in the current user, so we're just going to say OK to that, and look in the current user in the personal certificate store, and we'll see that we've got that certificate there, AX R3 MAVM access control. Okay, now what we want to do is go and export this, and so that we can use it. So I want to say yes to export the private key. So it's important when you run the command parameter that you're running as administrator, so that you've got the ability to export the private key. So we're going to export the private key. We'll leave all the default parameters. I'm going to go and put a password on it. So that protects the certificate's usage, because someone needs the obviously the parameters. So I'm going to go and put it in my temp directory that I'm working here. So I'm going to just say VM6 here, and we'll say save PSFX file, and we'll export. So that's the certificate exported from the certificate store, and we'll see that we have it here in the directory. Now while I'm here, I also want to export the non-private key version. So I'm going to go and export it again, and I'm going to say no, do not export the private key, and we're going to do base64 encoded, and we're going to browse. I'm going to call it VM6, but CER is what I want to call it. So that's the CER certificate. We're going to use this later when we go and configure our site. So I'm going to go and finish. Alright, so now we have two certificates. One's the PFX and one's the actual CER file. Alrighty, now that we have that, we can go back to our Azure where we were configuring the relaying party. So we can go and browse and upload our certificate. You just want to make sure that it is the PFX one. So you can see that by the extension, so here. So we're going to upload it. We're going to ask for the certificate password that we created. So we're going to upload it and say save. And that's our relaying party created. We'll also see in certificates that we have our certificate created there. So unsolicited sign-in, this is our certificate, so we're going to go and use that setting a little bit later as well. Okay, now we can go and tell AX about the settings. So we're going to go and look here into our application integration, and we're going to go to our login pages. So we see unsolicited sign in, and this gives us a login page parameter. So basically this parameter will be the redirect page that AX needs to know about, or at least the website needs to know about. So I'm going to come into my SharePoint site here. We're going to go into our application settings, and we're going to go and add a new parameter here. Okay, and the parameter that we've got is a parameter called SST sign-in URL. So I'm going to make SST sign-in URL is the parameter, and from our website where we just configured, so this is the login page, I'm going to take and copy that whole parameter here, and I'm going to go and put that into that parameter setting. So this basically is coded into the AX web controls to look for this parameter and look for the values and then go and use it. So now that we've made that change and that parameter is configured there, there's still quite a few more settings that we need to actually use or set up for this to actually work. But let's go and try our site. So HTTP AX site public. Okay, this should get us to the machine. If we spell it right, so I'm missing an S, sites, let it come up. Okay, so the page comes up. I'm going to go to vendor portal and I'm going to go to sign up. Now if we have the Azure Access Control configured and we've put that parameter in here, when I click OK, and it should go and take us out to the Azure and allow us to actually log in there. And so we can try to log in. So we'll put a password in there. Now there's more configuration to do, so what will happen here is that the return URL that we configured will be there, so that will return OK, but we haven't told the public side about some additional parameters, so I'm going to get an error when we sign back in here, and so we need to go and do some additional configuration for our public site to actually be able to work. So at this stage we're in a good place because we've got the site redirecting, we've got the relaying party actually configured up on Azure. Now there's also some additional parameters that we need to go and configure up there. So at this stage we've got our Azure site created and we've done the initial connection to our public site. So we'll leave the video here just so that we can break it into smaller consumables videos, and then we'll come back and finish the configuration